While at her husband's father's funeral, Monica Cole threw his loads out of their Dallas home and brought in her lover, unaware the man she humiliated that same day had just inherited his late father's $50 billion empire. Under the gray Texas sky, mourners wept, the choir sang, and Alexander Cole stood at the graveside, holding the folded flag that covered his father's coffin. Unaware that miles away, the woman he'd vowed to love was ordering movers to empty his closet and change the locks. At that very moment, while he buried the man who built their family fortune, she was pouring wine for Derek Lawson, his best friend, his rival, laughing, telling him she was finally free. To the world, she looked like a widow's wife, poised, grieving, loyal. But behind closed doors, she was rewriting her marriage into betrayal. She believed her husband was broken, poor, finished, a man drowning in loss. But what Monica didn't know was that the man she had just discarded like dirt at a graveside was now the sole heir to a $50 billion empire, an empire powerful enough to destroy everything she thought she'd stolen. In one day, she buried his father, mocked his love, and sealed her own downfall. Because while she slept beside her lover in the house that once belonged to her husband, lawyers were already signing documents that would make Alexander the most powerful man in Dallas. And her life, her lover, and her lies would soon belong to him again. But when a woman betrays her husband during his father's funeral, how does she face him when she learns he owns the world she tried to erase him from? And what will happen when the husband she threw out returns, not for revenge, but for reckoning? While you were burying your father, I was moving my lover into your house, Alexander. Those were the words Monica Cole whispered through her smirk, standing in the doorway of their Dallas mansion, wine glass in hand, as her husband returned from his father's funeral, still in black. She thought she had finally broken him, humiliated him beyond repair, turned his grief into mockery. You can collect your things after the funeral, Alex. Derek's moving in tonight, she added, her tone calm, deliberate, final. To her, it was freedom. To him, it was the quiet death of everything he believed in. But what Monica didn't know was that hours later, as the will was read in a marble boardroom across town, the man she discarded like a burden had just inherited his father's $50 billion empire. Every share, every company, every property, every ounce of power she thought he'd lost. She thought she'd thrown away a failure. What she really threw away was her future. And when the truth came out, her laughter became headlines, her lover's company crumbled overnight, and the courtroom turned into the stage of her public undoing. The children she claimed as his weren't his at all. The house she decorated for her affair now belonged legally and ruthlessly to the husband she'd humiliated. He didn't shout. He didn't curse. He simply adjusted his cufflinks, looked at her once and said, "You can keep the memories, Monica. I'll keep everything else." The city called it poetic justice. The press called it the $50 billion betrayal. But for Alexander Cole, it was never revenge. It was reclamation. He didn't destroy her out of anger. He let her destroy herself, slowly, publicly, completely, until mercy hurt more than vengeance ever could. Viewers, have you ever trusted someone so deeply that their betrayal felt like a knife you didn't see coming? Would you forgive, or would you make betrayal remember your name forever? The rain had just stopped over Dallas when the limousine rolled into the cemetery, its tires slicing through puddles that shimmered like broken glass beneath the gray sky. Alexander Cole stepped out first, tall, quiet, impeccably dressed in a black suit that still smelled faintly of his late father's cologne. His jaw was set, not in pride, but in grief so deep it looked rehearsed. Behind him, his wife, Monica, adjusted her veil, her eyes dry, her phone tucked discreetly in her palm, screen glowing with a message that wasn't meant for her husband to ever see. "Funerals are for the living," she'd once said. "The dead don't care." Today, those words came back like poison in his throat. Richard Cole's funeral was supposed to be a day of solemnity, the end of an era for Cole Global Holdings, the $50 billion empire Alexander had never expected to lead. Yet while he stood beside the coffin, thanking board members and childhood friends for their condolences, Monica's mind was elsewhere. counting the hours until Derek Lawson would arrive at their house, no longer as a guest, but as her new beginning. The moment Alexander turned to shake a family friend's hand, Monica's phone buzzed again. "Everything's ready. The movers just left. House looks different without his things." She smiled faintly and whispered a silent reply. The irony wasn't lost on her, throwing out her husband's belongings while he buried his father. To her, it wasn't cruelty. It was closure. She was tired of waiting for a man who'd been emotionally absent, chained to duty, drowning in legacy and grief. She wanted life, new, loud, exciting, and Derek promised her all that. But fate, that silent architect, was writing a script neither of them could see. When the priest's voice trembled over the final words, "Ashes to ashes, dust to dust," Alexander looked up at the sky, feeling his father's absence in the air heavier than the clouds above. A part of him wondered why Monica's hand hadn't found his. A part of him knew the answer. Still, he said nothing. He had already learned the art of silence, the kind his father called power. Hours later, as mourners drove away, Alexander lingered behind, fingers brushing the polished coffin. "I'll keep your name clean, Dad," he whispered. But as he returned home, everything changed. The gates of their house stood wide open. His luggage, his clothes, his briefcase, his late father's cufflinks were scattered across the driveway. Standing on the porch in a silk robe, Monica leaned into Derek's shoulder, wine glass in hand, laughing softly as if the funeral had never happened. Her voice was cold, casual. "You can pick up what's yours, Alex. It's time we both stopped pretending." He didn't argue. He didn't speak. He simply looked at her the way his father once looked at enemies before a deal, quietly, calculatingly. But how does a man bury his father and his marriage on the same day? And what will happen when the wife who threw him out discovers that the man she discarded now owns everything she ever desired? The night was heavy with the scent of wet earth and betrayal. Alexander stood by the open trunk of his car, packing what remained of his life into 2 suitcases. The echo of Monica's laughter drifted from inside the house, a sound he once loved, but now felt like glass scraping against his skin. Through the large bay window, he saw her tilt her head back as Derek poured wine into her glass, the same crystal goblets his father had gifted them on their wedding day. It wasn't just the sight, it was the calmness, the audacity of comfort in the ruins of mourning. She wasn't guilty, she was free. Monica's voice carried through the open door. "You always said you wanted to live like a king, Derek," she teased, brushing her lips against his. "Now you have the house, the cars, and me." Alexander's hands clenched the handle of his suitcase. He wanted to storm in, demand answers, but he stopped. Years of his father's teachings whispered in his head. Never fight where emotions lead. Strike where power listens. He closed the trunk and walked away, his shoes splashing through puddles like punctuation marks to a life-ending mid-sentence. 2 miles down the road, he parked near an old diner. The lights flickered against the rain streaked glass as he sat there, staring at the reflection of a man he barely recognized. Behind those calm eyes was a storm he couldn't yet define. Grief, yes, but something sharper, something that would later be called strategy. Inside the diner, a waitress recognized him. "Mr. Cole, I heard about your father. I'm so sorry." He nodded faintly. "Thank you," he murmured, forcing a polite smile. The warmth of human kindness cut through his numbness, if only slightly. By the time the clock struck midnight, he received a call from his sister, Evelyn. Her tone was tight, professional. "Alex, the board needs to meet tomorrow morning. There's been a development regarding Dad's estate." He rubbed his temples. "Whatever it is, tell them I'll sign whatever keeps the company stable. I can't—" "No," she interrupted sharply. "You need to be there. It's about you." Back at the house, Monica and Derek lay on the couch, laughing as they scrolled through photos of Alexander at the funeral. She smirked. He looked so pathetic in black, didn't he? Like grief was his only identity. Derek chuckled, pulling her close. "Forget him, babe. He's done. We'll sell this place soon, maybe move to Miami. You'll finally have the life you deserve." But Derek didn't know what Alexander's father had told his lawyer 2 weeks before his death. He didn't know the conditions written in ink, sealed and hidden from everyone but Evelyn and the board. The next morning, while Monica stretched luxuriously in silk sheets, Her ex-husband walked into a private conference room where the entire future of Cole Global Holdings waited to unfold, and her illusion of triumph was about to shatter. But how will Monica react when she learns the man she threw out last night now owns a $50 billion empire? And will Alexander forgive or unleash the storm his father warned the world about? Morning sunlight slanted through the glass towers of downtown Dallas, turning the city's skyline into blades of gold. Alexander stepped out of his car, shoulders squared, eyes hollow from a sleepless night. His tie was still knotted from the funeral, his cufflinks smudged with soil from his father's grave. Yet as he entered the boardroom of Cole Global Holdings, something shifted. The stillness of grief began to harden into purpose. Inside, 12 board members sat waiting. Evelyn Cole stood near the head of the table, a thick legal folder in her hand. She looked at her brother with a mixture of sadness and pride. "You came," she said quietly. "I always do," Alexander replied. The company's longtime attorney, Charles Wentworth, rose from his seat. "Before we begin, Mr. Cole, there's something your father left specifically for you. A private letter." He handed over an envelope sealed with Richard Cole's old signet ring, the same one Alexander used to play with as a child. Alexander hesitated, then broke the seal. Inside, his father's handwriting flowed in firm black ink. "My son, you were never meant to chase wealth. You were meant to carry integrity. I've left the empire to the one who can bear both. Remember this. Power test character. When they show you their true faces, stay silent until the time is right." He looked up, eyes burning. "What does this mean?" Charles cleared his throat. "It means, Mr. Cole, your father's entire estate, his shares, assets, properties, and holdings now belong to you, effective immediately." The room went quiet. $50 billion in total valuation, Evelyn added softly. Every division of the Cole Group, every subsidiary, transferred to you under Trust Clause 17. Alexander blinked, stunned. "That's impossible. It's binding," Charles interrupted. "Your father revised the will after learning about certain people's behavior during his illness." He didn't elaborate, but Evelyn's look said enough. "Monica." The board erupted in polite applause. Some offered handshakes, others admiration. But Alexander felt nothing. It wasn't victory. It was vindication without joy. His father's empire was now his. But so was the loneliness of knowing that the woman he loved had chosen betrayal over faith. Evelyn placed a hand on his arm. "Alex, Dad knew. About her. About Derek. He didn't say anything because he wanted to protect you until you were ready." He exhaled slowly. "So he left me everything." She nodded. "And disqualified her from assent. Any spouse proven unfaithful forfeits all claims. It's in black and white." Alexander leaned back, his mind replaying the night before. Monica in silk, Derek pouring wine, his luggage on the curb. The humiliation, the pity, the silence. But now silence had a different meaning. "Prepare the legal filings," he said calmly. "Freeze all joint accounts. Move the properties into trust under my name. And schedule a press briefing for Friday." Evelyn frowned. "What are you planning?" Alexander looked toward the window, watching the city glitter under the morning sun. "I'm just following Dad's last lesson. Wait until they show their faces, then let the truth do the talking." But when truth finally arrives, will Monica and Derek recognize the man they betrayed? Or the empire they just mocked? And how far will Alexander go to make sure they never rise again? That night, Alexander drove back to the same house where he had been humiliated 24 hours earlier. The mansion glowed with new life. Music playing, laughter spilling from the open balcony, Monica's silhouette visible in a robe of silver silk, her arms wrapped around Derek. To the world it looked like she'd simply moved on, but to Alexander every sound, every light, every trace of joy carved another mark into his resolve. He parked a few blocks away, turned off the headlights, and watched in silence. There was no anger in his eyes, no desperation, just a terrifying calm. His father used to say that vengeance begins not with fury, but with patience. And tonight, patience was all he had. Inside, Monica twirled a glass of red wine in her hand. "I told you He's too weak to fight back, she murmured, tracing Derek's chest. He's probably sleeping in his car right now. Derek smirked. Then let him. A man who can't keep his wife doesn't deserve a mansion. But neither of them knew that the man they mocked had already assumed control of Cole Global Holdings, that his lawyers were drafting documents that would make them legally invisible within weeks. At midnight, Alexander returned to his temporary apartment. Small, plain, nothing like the life he was born into. He sat at the desk, opened his laptop, and began reviewing files Evelyn had sent him, joint account records, property deeds, shell company ownerships. Every figure was a thread leading back to their greed. He whispered to himself, "They took my peace, my father's honor, my home. Now I'll take everything they think they own." The next morning, Alexander called his attorney, Samuel Green. "I want every joint asset frozen," Alexander said. "All credit cards under Monica's name canceled, all property titles reviewed. No announcement yet. Quiet moves first." Samuel hesitated. "You're serious about this?" "Serious." Alexander's voice dropped low. "This isn't revenge, Sam. It's education." Over the next few days, Alexander's strategy unfolded like a silent storm. He met with trust officers, transferred holdings through subsidiaries, and discreetly purchased Derek's logistics company shares through offshore accounts. It was surgical. No noise, no emotion, just precision. Meanwhile, Monica's world remained glittering. She redecorated the house, changed the locks, posted pictures online of her new life, tagging luxury brands as if trying to rewrite her past. Derek, confident, spent freely, cars, watches, trips, unaware that every transaction was being tracked, every debt recorded under new ownership. One evening, Evelyn called. "You know you could just expose them, Alex. One press release and they're finished." He looked out over the city from his apartment window, lights flickering like a chessboard beneath him. "No," he said. "Exposure is mercy. I'm giving them what they gave me. Time to feel safe before the fall." The line went quiet. Evelyn exhaled. "You sound just like Dad." Alexander smiled faintly. "Then he taught me well." But how long can calm silence hide the thunder gathering beneath it? And when Alexander finally strikes, will Monica realize she was living inside the empire of the man she betrayed? 3 weeks later, the Dallas skyline shimmered in the morning sun. Bright, calm, oblivious to the quiet war unfolding beneath its glass towers. Derek Lawson stretched in the balcony of what used to be Alexander's home, sipping espresso beside Monica. Life was perfect, or so it seemed. His logistics firm had just signed a new contract. Monica was talking about expanding her home decor business, and their friends had stopped whispering about the scandal. Monica flipped through her tablet, smiling. "I told you everything would fall into place once we let go of the past. You're brilliant, Derek. You made it all so easy." Derek grinned, his ego swelling. "Well, it helps when your rival collapses." But that morning, something small, a detail too ordinary to notice, shifted in the air. Derek's assistant called. "Sir, the company's offshore account just froze. Bank says it's under review." He frowned. "That can't be right. Move the funds to our domestic account." "I tried, sir." The voice trembled. "It's locked, too." Monica looked up, confused. "What's wrong?" "Probably a technical glitch," he said, forcing a smile. But inside, unease rippled through him. By noon, unease turned to panic. His CFO burst into his office, papers trembling in his hand. "We've been acquired, sir." Derek blinked. "Acquired? By who?" "A holding firm out of Delaware. Quiet buyout through multiple shells, effective yesterday." He snatched the papers and froze when he saw the signature. Cole Strategic Trust. His coffee cup slipped from his hand and shattered. Meanwhile, in a high-rise office across the city, Alexander Cole watched the live financial feed with a calm expression. The red numbers scrolling across Derek's firm's valuation didn't thrill him. They steadied him. His attorney, Samuel Green, leaned back with quiet awe. "That's it. You own his company now. Do you want me to initiate the restructuring?" Alexander nodded. "Fire him first." Samuel raised a brow. "Publicly?" Alexander's voice was cool, deliberate. "No. Let him come to work tomorrow and find out from security." That evening, Monica noticed Derek pacing the living room, muttering to himself. "You're scaring me," she said. What happened? He snapped. Someone's playing games, I'll handle it. But the tremor in his voice betrayed him. She tried to soothe him, running her hand down his arm. You're overthinking. You always said Alexander was too soft to fight back. He stared at her, jaw tight. Maybe I was wrong. Across town, Alexander sat alone in his father's old study, the same one Richard Cole used to plot corporate takeovers in. The air smelled of aged whiskey and polished wood. On the desk sat a framed photo of his wedding day, Monica smiling at him under a cascade of white roses. He turned the photo face down. That's one, he whispered. Outside, the city glittered as if celebrating, but beneath that glitter, Monica's new world had begun to crack, quietly, invisibly, like glass under pressure. And as the first domino fell, one question burned. If losing a company hurts Derek, what will it take to make Monica feel the weight of her betrayal? The morning Derek Lawson arrived at work, the security gate didn't open. His access card flashed red, then red again. The guard shifted uncomfortably. Sir, I'm sorry. Your credentials have been revoked. Revoked? Derek snapped. I'm the CEO. The guard sighed and handed him a sealed envelope. Derek tore it open. Inside, a single sentence typed in bold. Effective immediately, your employment and all executive privileges at Lawson Logistics have been terminated. At the bottom, Alexander's signature. By noon, the news had spread. Financial blogs lit up with headlines. Cole Holdings acquires Lawson Logistics in quiet takeover. Former CEO Derek Lawson ousted amid restructuring. Monica's phone buzzed nonstop. Messages from her social circle flooded in. Fake sympathies laced with gossip. Her so-called friends who once toasted her freedom now whispered about karma. She tried calling Derek, but his phone went straight to voicemail. When he finally returned home, his face was ashen, his hands trembling. Everything's gone, he said flatly. Every account, every asset, frozen. He owns it all. Who? She demanded. Alexander, he whispered. It's him. Monica laughed nervously. That's impossible. You said he was broke. He was, Derek said, collapsing into a chair. Until now. That evening, as they argued in the living room, the doorbell rang. Monica stormed to the door and froze. A man in a tailored navy suit stood there, holding a thick envelope and a clipboard. Mrs. Cole, he began smoothly, this property has officially transferred ownership. You are hereby served a 30-day eviction notice. She blinked. What are you talking about? This is my house. The man handed her the document. Not anymore, ma'am. It now belongs to Cole Strategic Trust, the same name that had taken Derek's company. Monica's voice trembled. No, there's some mistake. Not a mistake, Derek muttered from behind her, realization dawning. It's him. He bought the house, too. As the agent left, Monica dropped to her knees, staring at the marble floor. The home she'd stolen from her husband, the home where she paraded her affair, now legally belonged to him again. Meanwhile, across town, Alexander stood on the same balcony of his father's estate, the one Monica had refused to live in because it was too old, too quiet. He watched the sunset bleed over Dallas, his phone vibrating with alerts of completed transfers. Evelyn's voice came through the speaker. The eviction notice has been served. You want to handle the media next? Alexander's tone was calm. No. Let her friends handle that for me. By morning, social media was ablaze. Photos of Monica's luxury lifestyle were paired with fresh gossip. Threw her husband out, now being evicted from his house. Karma moves fast when your ex runs a billion-dollar empire. Monica sat by the window, scrolling through the storm of comments, each one slicing deeper than the last. Derek's company was gone. Their accounts were empty. Their names mocked everywhere. And as silence fell over the mansion she once called hers, she whispered the first truth she had spoken in months. Oh my God, and what have we done? But Alexander wasn't done. He'd only completed strike 2. The next one would destroy the one illusion she still clung to, the family she believed was hers. The day began with quiet dread. Monica had spent the night pacing, unable to sleep, clutching her phone as if the screen could explain how everything unraveled so quickly. Derek sat motionless on the couch, eyes hollow, the light from the window slicing across his unshaven face. Their empire of deceit, money, comfort, status had turned to smoke, and now there was only silence between them. Then came the knock, sharp, intentional. She opened the door to find a courier in a gray suit. "Mrs. Cole?" Her breath caught at the name. "Yes?" He handed her a sealed envelope marked Superior Court of Dallas County. "You've been served. Mandatory paternity verification hearing. Court date, Thursday 10 a.m. Her fingers trembled. "Paternity?" The man nodded politely. "It's a court order filed by Mr. Alexander Cole." The envelope slipped from her hands. That night, she stared at her sleeping children, Ryan and Chloe, their faces peaceful, unaware of the storm brewing above them. Her mind spiraled through memories she had buried. The nights she told Derek it was safe, the excuses she made when the timelines blurred, the guilt that gnawed at her but never enough to stop. Derek tried to reassure her. "It's just a scare tactic. He's trying to hurt you." But deep down, he wasn't sure. Thursday arrived like a funeral. The courtroom was cold, sterile, filled with the faint hum of whispers. Alexander sat at the plaintiff's table, composed, dressed in black. No anger, no arrogance, just stillness. Monica couldn't meet his eyes. Judge Reeves looked over the documents. "Mrs. Cole, Mr. Lawson, pursuant to the filed motion, DNA samples were collected last week. The results are conclusive." He paused, scanning the papers. "For the record, neither of the two children, Ryan Cole and Chloe Cole, share biological relation to Mr. Alexander Cole." The words detonated like gunfire. Monica gasped, covering her mouth. Derek's head dropped into his hands. Cameras clicked from the gallery. The news outlets were already there, tipped off by someone unseen. Evelyn Cole sat behind her brother, expression unreadable. The judge continued. "Furthermore, the paternity fraud constitutes grounds for annulment of spousal inheritance and child support claims. Effective immediately, Mrs. Cole forfeits all rights to the Cole estate." Monica's world collapsed. The walls seemed to tilt, the air thick with humiliation. She turned toward Alexander for mercy, but his gaze was unyielding, steady, distant, almost sorrowful. He rose calmly, buttoned his jacket, and addressed the court. "I hold no hatred toward Mrs. Cole," he said, "only gratitude for showing me who deserved my loyalty and who didn't." He turned and walked out, reporters shouting questions behind him. Monica tried to follow, tears streaking her face. "Alex, please, they're still our kids." He stopped just once. "No, Monica, they were never ours." When the doors closed, Monica collapsed to the floor, sobbing as Derek whispered curses under his breath. The courtroom emptied around them, leaving the echo of Alexander's footsteps fading into destiny. But he wasn't finished. The empire was his, but justice was personal, and his next strike would ensure they could never rise again. 2 weeks later, the city of Dallas buzzed with anticipation. The Cole divorce trial, once whispered about behind closed doors, had now exploded into national headlines. Reporters swarmed the courthouse steps, cameras flashing like lightning as Alexander Cole arrived, flanked by his sister Evelyn and attorney Samuel Green. His calmness unnerved even the journalists. There was no bitterness in his face, just focus, as if this was not revenge, but the completion of an audit. Inside, Monica sat at the defendant's table, her hands trembling beneath the polished oak surface. Gone was the elegance, the glow, the arrogance. She wore black again, but this time not for mourning. This was defeat disguised as dignity. Derek sat beside her, hollow-eyed, his once perfect suit hanging loose, his watch already repossessed by creditors. Judge Reeves entered, and silence fell. "Mr. Cole," the judge began, "your petition seeks full dissolution of marriage, custody withdrawal, financial damages, and the execution of corporate clauses related to marital fraud. Are you proceeding with all claims?" Alexander rose, his voice smooth and steady. "Yes, Your Honor, all claims." Monica's attorney, a man she'd hired with the last of her jewelry money, stood shakily. "Your Honor, my client acted under emotional distress following the death of Mr. Cole's father. She seeks reconciliation." A soft murmur ran through the courtroom. Alexander simply tilted his head, almost pitying her. Samuel Green stepped forward. Your Honor, we'd like to introduce Exhibit 14 through 21. Text messages, financial records, and photographs proving not only the extramarital affair, but the systematic transfer of Mr. Cole's assets by the defendants into joint personal accounts used for private luxury. The judge glanced over the exhibits, his brows knitting tighter with every page. Mrs. Cole, he said finally, do you deny these communications? Monica's lips parted, but no sound came. Derek lowered his head, unable to look at her or anyone else. Then Samuel handed over the final document, a certified transcript of Richard Cole's final will. He addressed the judge clearly. Per Clause 17, any spouse proven unfaithful forfeits all claim to inheritance and marital property. The evidence speaks for itself. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Reporters scribbled furiously. The gavel struck twice. Judge Reeves leaned back. After review of all evidence presented, the court finds in favor of Mr. Cole. All joint assets revert to the Cole Trust. The defendants are ordered to vacate all properties immediately, repay misused funds, and are barred from future claims against the Cole estate. Monica gasped audibly. Derek muttered something under his breath, a curse that dissolved into silence. The judge continued, his voice now stern. Furthermore, Mrs. Cole and Mr. Lawson are charged with marital fraud and asset manipulation. A separate hearing will determine restitution. As the gavel fell, Alexander stood. He didn't smile. He didn't gloat. He simply adjusted his cufflinks, the same silver pair his father once wore, and whispered, "Checkmate." Outside, the courthouse doors burst open to flashing cameras and reporters shouting his name. Alexander paused at the top of the stairs, looked toward the sky, and quietly said, "Rest easy, Dad. It's done." Behind him, Monica stumbled into the sunlight, eyes red, makeup running, reporters swarming. Derek walked away in silence, their empire shattered, their reputations destroyed. But Alexander's story wasn't ending here. It was only shifting, because his next move wouldn't just ruin their lives, it would erase their legacy entirely. The morning after the verdict, Dallas awoke to chaos. Every major media outlet carried the same headline, splashed in bold across their front pages. Wife throws husband out during funeral, gets crushed after he inherits 50-baud empire. By noon, the story had gone global. News anchors dissected every detail of Monica and Derek's downfall. Talk shows replayed courtroom clips, and financial analysts praised Alexander Cole's strategic composure. The internet turned their betrayal into spectacle. Memes, think pieces. Even podcasts sprouted overnight, chronicling the most devastating revenge in corporate history. At Cole Global's headquarters, Alexander sat in his father's old chair, watching the media storm unfold on the wall-size screen. He didn't smile, not once. He simply turned to Samuel Green. "Proceed with Phase 5. Samuel nodded. "Understood." That afternoon, the dominoes began to fall faster than anyone could stop them. Derek's name was scrubbed from corporate records. His remaining companies, funded with Monica's misappropriated transfers, were subpoenaed, audited, and stripped of credit lines. Investors fled like smoke before fire. Within 48 hours, every account linked to Derek Lawson froze. The man who once bragged about living like a king couldn't withdraw enough to buy lunch. His mansion lease was terminated. His cars repossessed. Even the luxury watches Monica had flaunted online were seized as part of restitution. Monica's nightmare deepened. The friends who once envied her now avoided her. Boutique brands that sent her free gowns blocked her email. Her face, once adorned on society pages, was now synonymous with infidelity and greed. She tried to call Alexander, dozens of times, but each call went unanswered. One night she left a voicemail, her voice trembling. "Alex, I know I failed you. I was lost. But please, I have nothing left. The kids, they still need you." He never listened to it. Instead, he hosted a press conference. Cameras filled the Cole Tower auditorium. Alexander stepped to the podium, composed, powerful, and strangely gentle in tone. "I was raised to believe that success isn't measured by what you gain, but by what you refuse to let destroy you," he said, his voice calm and resonant. "Betrayal is a debt that always collects itself. I've settled mine. Not with anger, but with accountability. The applause was thunderous. Every major outlet quoted him. The markets responded instantly. Coal global stock surged by 15%. But the true humiliation came hours later, when Alexander's communications team released the internal audit files to the public. Documents showing Monica and Derek's emails, transfers, even their mocking messages about owning the house by Friday. The internet tore them apart. Sponsors dropped Derek's firms. Monica's face was plastered beside headlines reading, "From trophy wife to tragic warning." That night, Derek left her. No note. No goodbye. Just silence and an empty closet. Monica stood in their nearly bare living room, staring at eviction papers and flashing news clips, whispering to herself through tears, "He didn't just destroy us. He erased us." And somewhere across town, Alexander poured himself a drink, stared out over the Dallas skyline, and murmured, "Not yet." Because the sixth strike, the final one, wasn't about money or courtrooms. It was about identity. 6 months later, Dallas glittered with the promise of summer again. The scars of scandal had faded from headlines, replaced by fresher gossip and newer tragedies. But beneath the surface, two people still carried the weight of the storm they'd created. Monica and Derek had vanished from society pages, bankrupt, abandoned, and forgotten. Yet fate wasn't finished with them. On a humid Thursday morning, Monica dressed for a job interview, her last hope after dozens of rejections. She wore a cheap black dress, ironed too many times, and clutched a fading leather purse. The taxi dropped her before a sleek skyscraper, its mirrored glass towering above her like a monument to everything she'd lost. She didn't know it was Cole Global Holdings. The receptionist greeted her politely. "Mrs. Cole?" She read from the resume, hesitating slightly. "Just Monica," she said quickly, forcing a smile. "I'm here for the administrative position." "Right this way." They led her into a conference room, modern, minimalist, cold. A panel of executives sat waiting, and at the head of the table, calm, composed, sat Alexander Cole. For a heartbeat, she couldn't breathe. Her purse slipped from her hand and hit the floor. "Alex," she whispered, voice breaking. I didn't know." He rose slowly, buttoning his jacket, eyes steady but not cruel. "You didn't have to," he said quietly. "You just needed to show up." The executives exchanged glances, sensing the history burning between them. Alexander nodded for them to leave. When the door closed, the silence was thick enough to choke her. She trembled. "I've lost everything. Derek's gone. The children, they barely speak to me. I was wrong. I see that now." He studied her, emotionless. "You don't need to tell me that, Monica. The world already has." Tears welled in her eyes. "Please, I just need a chance to start over." He walked to the window, gazing over the city that had witnessed both his destruction and his rebirth. "Funny," he said softly. "That's what I said the night you threw me out. While I was burying my father, you were burying me." She covered her face and wept. "I was foolish, greedy. I thought love wasn't enough. I thought you'd never become more than the man I outgrew." He turned to her at last, voice low and firm. "You didn't outgrow me, Monica. You outgrew decency, and that's one thing I could never compete with." He walked past her, stopped at the door, and said without turning, "You'll get the job. Reception desk, entry level, minimum wage, no privileges. Work there if you must. But remember whose building you're standing in." Then he left. Monica fell to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably, not just from humiliation, but from the devastating truth that mercy from the man she betrayed hurt more than his vengeance ever did. Later that night, Alexander visited his father's grave. The air was still, the marble cool beneath his hand. "I didn't destroy her, Dad," he whispered. "I just let her see what she became." He turned toward the horizon where the city lights glowed like constellations, proof that even after betrayal, dignity could rebuild empires. And for the first time in a long time, Alexander Cole smiled, not as a man who won, but as one who was finally free.